Welcome back to Season 2 of In the Middle of It, a podcast about participation culture.
Join us out in the field as we explore what it really takes to grow participation culture in communities.
I'm Cissy Rock.
I'm Lucy-Mary Mulholland.
And I'm Duncan Matthews. In the Middle of It, Season 2 starts now.
Let's go.
We're wanting people to be able to create their own opportunities for people to participate, and we're wanting lots of different ways for people to be able to do that, and that those two things aren't neatly in alignment.
It's like we're kind of pushing the balls down the hill. Now I feel like the balls are just rolling themselves. We don't have to do that pushing anymore.
Everybody has something different to offer at different times, and when you offer something into a participatory space, it's saying it's what I have to offer into this space right now.
Kia ora and welcome back to In the Middle of It.
Wow, here we are. Season 2.
Another whole 6 episodes await us. Duncan thinks we should all be on the edge of our seats. I've just listened to all of Season 1, and I was thinking some of the key things that we talked about was our 5 principles.
Which were?
Well, you name them, Duncan.
Speed and variety is the one that stands out a lot. Te tiriti o waitangi and binocular vision is perhaps one we've been grappling with the most.
Everything happens in context.
Getting alongside people and
Relationships before ideas.
yes.
Which I really think a lot of the tension is around the desire for ideas before we actually form the relationships. And I guess that's what this episode here is about, is like, how do we get traction? You've listened over the last 6 podcasts around us setting things up and getting our feet under the table, but now we really are in the middle of it.
Yeah.
You know, how do we get traction?
Yes, I guess we've been seeing some stuff actually bubbling up on the ground, right? Like our weavers have been initiating things, testing things out. One kind of beautiful example we've seen is our weavers in Hoonhay invented something called Hot Choc Around the Block, where they basically just take out a little picnic table and a thermos with some hot chocolate and just hang out at a local park and chat with people and just, I think, really get a chance to meet people in the community and see what people are interested in, what they'd like to see, what they might like to get involved in, and also use it as an opportunity just to weave people together. Like we heard this lovely story about at their hot choc at the park, this new neighbour who just moved into the area. They were able to introduce him to a local that lived there, and the two of them sat on the park bench and had a chat while their kids played together.
I mean, is that something that they're doing on a regular basis?
They've taken a little pause now, but they were doing sort of several. They were kind of doing it sort of every week for a little while. And then from that, ideas started bubbling, I think. And so they thought, okay, right, let's try and put some energy into a slightly bigger thing or, you know, something a little bit more established and set up a little parents group. Because that's what they were hearing, parents initially wanting to learn first aid for their kids, but actually really just wanting to get together with other parents and connect. And so they started that. And then from that kind of rippled this idea of putting on a very mini kind of community market that people from the parents group ended up being stallholders at.
Have you noticed that who is in the role of the weaver influences what bubbles up? Like I was thinking about how there's been quite a focus on families and parenting where the weavers are parents.
That's true. Yes. I do think that probably influences it. They're probably maybe more attuned to hearing things that are in their kind of wheelhouse or in the realm of what they also care about. That really lifts up the importance of having weaver teams that have a diversity, right? That come with different backgrounds or things they care about.
I like what you're saying about you do the setup and then trying to get traction is really about trying to get hold of all these ideas and connections, and some of it already exists. So you might be hanging around places where people are already gathering or doing things. And then sometimes you've got to create your own sort of false place of bumping. And that's what, Choc Around the Block is, right? It's a contrived way of creating connection so that ideas will bubble up.
Yeah, I've been thinking a little bit about like the chicken and egg thing. Is like ideally you want it to start kind of having its own momentum where ideas create relationships, which lead to new ideas, which create new relationships. But in the beginning, sometimes you just need to, like you said, do something to kind of just get the ball rolling. Holly, actually, one of our weavers, uses that phrase a lot. She says it's like we're kind of pushing the balls down the hill. Now I feel like the balls are just rolling themselves. We don't have to do that pushing anymore.
So if we looked across all 3 weaver teams, what would be some of the things they did to get the balls rolling?
Having like little drop-in sessions, so kind of being present at, say, a local community centre or the local library. A bit similar to that hot choc thing of just being available for a chat, sometimes having cups of tea and things on offer. So that was one the other thing was actually just getting out and attending other things that were already happening in the community. I'm thinking about Tui going down to the Mangakua Tukutuku Gully and just seeing what they're doing with planting.
A walking group, I believe?
Yep, so that's right. Charles set up a walking group in Glenview, which has just started small but is slowly sort of growing, and they're finding people coming into that who are then have ideas for other things they want to do. Tui as well with her rāranga, set up a rāranga class at the local library. Again, it's just that sparked. 2 people came to that, got really interested in rongoa and wanting to maybe set up a group.
What are the sorts of things that have been happening up in Wellsford?
They also had drop-in sessions at the local library and then kind of having a little pop-up space in a community venue there. They also have put on pop-ups, like just kind of a play day in the local community hall, then kind of using, again, pre-existing things that are happening to try and talk to people. Or the school disco is happening, so they hosted like a little parents' room off to the side where they tried to use that as an opportunity to connect with parents and talk to them and find out what they were interested in and weave parents together. So trying to find little bubbles within existing gatherings.
And some of the times we've needed to be a little bit more directive with what our weavers are doing. Now, some of those have come out really well as well. I'm thinking of the cooking club. It's been a success in a couple of locations, Wellsford and...
There's been a cooking element woven into one of the Skillshare events in Glenview. But yeah, I think the cooking club was a good idea because I think that came out when all the ideas sort of being floated were getting quite organised. And I remember you sort of, Cissy, kind of floating the idea of what about just, 6 to 8 people get together, they just cook together. One person is sort of the head chef leading the recipe, but everyone's getting involved, everyone's got a job to play, and just keep it really, really low key. So I think sometimes that's where I've noticed where we've brought in more of sort of a bit more direction is just helping with the scaling. Sometimes just scaling things down to a really, what's the most basic version we could do of this, just as that first little test. And then if there's energy there, then maybe it gets taken forward, but let's not overproduce it in the first step.
Because I've noticed since we've been talking, you're starting to think, what are ways that we can get going with people? What are the things that can help us build relationships? And we've kind of got to bring ourselves back to saying, what are the common denominator activities? Because that really was an underlying idea that there are some things that bring different people together. And I guess that's what we're looking for, is mixing up the different bubbles, as you call them, in the community. And perhaps cooking's one of them, gardening, walking.
Yep, sharing of things. I think that's been a really popular thing in Glenview. They've got involved in a crop swap, which has also drawn in, people not just bringing vegetables to share and fruit, but also baking, and then someone coming down to share their love of making roti and teaching everyone how to make roti. So it's sort of that wanting to share with each other in a community is quite strong, I think, as a common denominator activity.
So you and I were talking about in the car on the way to the studio, actually, about one of our ideas at the beginning of this had been sending out some postcards or something to sort of invite people in. And then we got a little bit stuck on what are we inviting people into? That's been maybe an over-focus on our activities rather than, the mindset of what we need to be in or what our weavers need to be in when they're working on the ground. And I think, the hot choc around the block has really changed that, where we're offering hot chocolate incentive in itself, but we are, just trying to create those bumping spaces rather than worrying about what are we inviting people into.
I think it's difficult, right? Because on one hand, we're sort of saying, look, get out there, talk to people, relationships first, see what happens from these relationships. But there's also a pressure to get these relationships happening quite quickly.
Yes.
Right? And relationships typically don't happen that quickly, right? So perhaps I think if I was a weaver, I'd be out there thinking, what is enough? Is it good enough that I just talk to the people at the school gate? Do I have to try and listen out for the idea and push it together and create an idea? Like, how much is enough? How much is too much? And I think that getting traction is being able to trust ourselves and understand what it is that we're trying to create, which is going to be different every time, which is what makes it so sort of sophisticated, even though it seems simple.
I've really loved one of the phrases that Lisa from our Hoonhay team has talked about, this idea of keen people and keen people as a way of trying to, as you said, like what kind of listening am I doing? Like, when do I know where to put my time and energy? And she said for her, it's, keen people, want to come to a community event, but keen people are the ones who want to actually get involved in making it happen. And I think she said for her, that's kind of been a way of helping to sort of really tune her ear to particular conversations, particular relationships within the community, and where to then put her energy.
We're wanting people to be able to create their own opportunities for people to participate. And we're wanting lots of different ways for people to be able to do that. And that those two things aren't neatly in alignment. You can attend an event and not really have participated.
Yes. Yeah.
And maybe you can participate but not really have attended an event. Like maybe the participation is telling the neighbour about the thing that's happening. And it's very hard for us to measure all of that.
Yes. We've been trying to think a bit about that and, what are the signs that people have participated? It's very easy to get caught up into those ideas of counting numbers, which tell you somebody came along. It doesn't tell you if they participated. At the other end of the spectrum, you can ask lots of people how they participated or what they got out of the day or who they met. And that's a different measure, but perhaps quite an intensive measure. And it also doesn't tell you, did they meet one new neighbour and had a good time, or did they fundamentally change their mindset from being involved in this community activity and they're going to become one of the keen people who continues to participate and contribute back into their community?
And are we weighting that differently?
Well, I think weighting implies measuring.
Yeah, but like, are we saying, the keen people are more important than just the keen people?
True.
Like, that's the thing that I want to grapple with.
When I was talking to Lisa about this, she was kind of seeing it as a way of giving her role clarity, that sense of, being a paid community person in a place. There's that sense of perhaps being seen as the go-to for everything, go-to for services, maybe you feel like you're the Citizens Advice Bureau or you're the service provider, or that's kind of how community workers are seen in community at the moment, right? And I think for her, she was saying that was kind of helping her clarify the weaver role of, I can't be everything to everybody, but really what I can do is to be that one who can come alongside the keen people so they can create events that attract keen people, and that's my unique contribution in this place so that I don't get sucked into doing all of these other roles that are typically filled by community workers or community developers.
And I think that is a tension, right? Like, one, clarity, and what's the opposite of clarity? Chaos. So the desire as humans we have to lower anxiety by having clarity, and yet often the magic comes from being able to really hold ourselves in the grey area, and then the default in maybe not us, but the community seeing us as community workers, which is not what this is at all about. And so we have this idea of a default of a community worker, and therefore we need to have some clarity around the scope of our community work. But we're actually trying to pollinate this very organic, unstructured, nameless thing that looks different in every context, called participation culture. And so these two things are really at odds with each other, and we're having to work so hard to not default.
Yeah, I think that's huge, hey? And how to hold some kind of discipline in a way, like, there is something we're trying to experiment with, something tangible, and yet hold that organicness. And I know that, we've sort of talked a bit about that. We created like a bit of a script, right? This came out of a conversation with one of the Weaver teams where they sort of thought, when we get to that point of, say, meeting a keen person and they want to bring an idea to life, what's the questions we ask that help them to flesh that idea out? And we had this big conversation where we came up with a whole bunch of questions. And I did end up putting it down into what could be seen as a script. But I think when we talked about it with the Weavers, it was like, these are questions to have in your back pocket. So feel free to pull on them as and when they're helpful, but let the organicness of the conversation lead you through that kind of relationship. And I think that was a way of sort of holding some discipline around having some questions that are sort of kind of more form and structure, but just having them in the back pocket so that the organicness of the conversation is what pulls out the questions rather than the questions forcing the conversation to happen in a certain order or follow a certain track.
Like a counter to the magnet effect of, and we've talked a lot about the magnet effect, this pull back to what we know, and then how do we counter that?
That's it. Yeah. And I think there does need to be some discipline in that. Otherwise, we do all just kind of default, right? But how do we bring in discipline whilst also holding the organicness?
That makes me wonder if I've kind of overestimated what an individual is capable of doing. Like I had in my mind this kind of fantasy of someone who got on well in the community and could strike up a conversation and could naturally help support people to come up with their own ideas. But that isn't really a package, is it? That's a typecast or a stereotype or something.
Yeah, I think there's some innate things in there that I see in all of our weavers, but there's a lot of other things, I think even myself, have had to build skill around that. I draw a lot on my therapy background to try and create the right environment where people are comfortable enough to open up and share their idea. There's all these little skill sets that go into that, and it's not necessarily a given that everyone can do all of those different things.
So do you think the role of weaver is too amorphous?
No, I think it's kind of clear in my mind. I just think that everyone comes in from a different door. Some people come in through the door if they're really awesome at those getting out and talking to people, those organic relationships, but maybe need to grow a little bit more of the sort of that organizational side of actually, okay, if we're putting something on, we need to create a little bit of a plan and who's doing what. And then other people come in through that door of being awesome organizers. They're really good at creating the designs and the plans, but they need more of that skill building around stepping back and just holding space for people to share their ideas and let that creativity emerge. So I think everyone comes with a different strength, and I think there's that journey of rounding ourselves as weavers to kind of grow in all these different areas.
I was running a facilitation workshop last night, training people how to be facilitators. And at the end, some people said, I've realised I don't do enough preparation. And then some people say, I realise I do lots of preparation, but I'm not noticing what's happening in the meeting, right? So everyone's got something to contribute. There's just some bits we dial up and dial down.
I think that's what I've loved about working on this project with the team here is just that space around, reflection, to notice these things about ourselves or within our team, our work, which sometimes doesn't happen when you kind of just are implementing something, not having that space and time to reflect on that rounding out process.
And we need to build that in.
100%.
Now that we're trying to get traction, I'm starting to think, it's not really long enough. But I guess if you think about any group that you've belonged to, the first time you're a bit tentative, the second time you're starting to get to know people, but it's actually quite a long certain number of hours and repetitive experiences before you start to feel yourself and feel a sense of belonging. And that's the same thing that we're trying to create. Duncan, you said that the binocular approach was something that we've spent a lot of time really working with. How has that played out in this moment of trying to get traction?
Yeah, I was just reflecting. I've been doing some evaluating over the last few weeks, and this idea of either over or underestimating people or what skills people should or shouldn't have, or, is a little bit square. And as I've been trying to push myself to move more into the circular thinking, and I think it's also aligned to what we're actually trying to do, moving to participatory models of community rather than a lot of the models we currently have are based on charitable models or representation models, where the charity model in particular is we are some people that have something and we're going to give it to this other group of people that doesn't have something. And what that misses that I think participation culture is better at getting going with is everybody has something different to offer at different times. And when you offer something into a participatory space, it's saying, this is what I have right now that I can offer to make our community, our neighborhood, whatever. I don't even want to say better. That's not the right word. It's what I have to offer into the space right now. And what that does is acknowledging that everyone else had or has something to offer in the past, present, or future into that same space. And it doesn't matter whether that past, present, or future is yesterday, 10 years ago, or 30 years into the future. Everybody has something at different times and different things to offer. It's not always monetary, it's not always time, it's not always an idea. And I think that's when we compress everything down to the 1 year of a pilot, we default back to that square of what people are or aren't offering within that 1 year.
And I think community development has its roots in benevolence. We've really seen people wanting to offer services. There's nothing wrong with that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Apart from the fact that when you look through a different lens, you're saying we all want to be connected. I mean, what do you think about that?
I really like that sense of everyone has something to offer, just because it goes back to what you were saying before about participation might be that one person who just reshares the post on social media. Like that's what they have at that time to give, is just that little bit of uffy around comms, or someone might be really involved in helping with the organising of an event. Yeah, the sense of, rather than everyone needing to deliver something, everyone has an offering to make based on where they're at, their own uniqueness, and what they're sort of seeing as potential emerging within the community.
Can I provoke something amongst us three? Does offering fit into this capitalist system of production?
No.
So how is it different? If you're only valuing people what they offer?
I guess the way I see it differently is, say, in a capitalist system, is like to achieve an outcome, people are employed and paid a wage to deliver on something, and it's controlled and it's led by usually one person or one organisation. Whereas the way it's different is these offerings are spontaneous, they're given freely. There's no expectation of direct reciprocity for that action. So it's that sense of, I don't need to get paid for this because I'm going to see a benefit come from this. We're going to get this cool little event that,
I've heard a lot of people say, I have nothing to offer. So I think there's something in being valued around whether you're offering something or not.
Well, I think having something to offer is measurement of how much is coming out. And so when you say I have nothing to offer, it's what they're actually saying is, I have nothing which meets someone's expectations, whether it's their own or other people's, of what an offering should look like.
Yeah.
It's the measurement of it, which is the capitalist, neoliberal, all those bad words right now, application here.
So I think differently. See, I think participation doesn't mean you have to contribute. Like, I don't see people participating as something that has a reciprocal nature, that there's an offering or that you have to speak up. I think participation is around a sense of belonging and feeling like you're connected.
To me, to achieve that belonging and feeling of connected, there needs to be some kind of reciprocity, though.
Even if someone's just witnessing something.
That's the reciprocity, though, because my presence as a witness is, the reciprocity will come from how good the corridor is. Like, it's not, I don't need to be paid to be the witness, but by playing that role, I'm contributing to this bigger effect.
Being the witness requires you to be in the room and be present and pay attention, not scrolling on your phone.
Because I probably wouldn't even label that as a witness. I would say that person's participating. Like, not in different roles, but we're participating. Sometimes we talk, sometimes we listen. No matter what we're doing, we are participating in that meeting. If we lift that up and put that into a community, you don't actually have to be offering something to be participating in that community.
There's a good example in that our team just recently ran a little spring market. And I think what was interesting about this is, on the surface, you could report on this as this many people came and this was the scale and all sort of stuff. But hearing the stories that come out of it, of what people, so for example, all the stallholders, when they came together, all collectively put up the gazebos together. It wasn't done for them in advance. People got together and shared a stall together and started talking about, there was this ideas bubbling around wanting to do a garage sale type one next time. So offering new ideas into the space. Parents just showed up, and while their kids played together, they saw parents meeting for the first time and introducing themselves. People were there selling their wares, their little side hustles. There was participation happening, but it was very different forms and different ways, and you wouldn't see that on the surface in a report. I think there's something valuable in seeing the ripples that come from these things as a way of measuring this work.
And we're only measuring this work
because we have to.
Yeah, because somewhere along the line, we're wanting people paid to be weavers. So we've got to measure it to be able to show that this is worthwhile.
But I don't think that's even just a square concept. And say Te Māori, this idea of tohu, in circular systems, you're looking for signs that things are moving in the right direction, or we're on the right track, or, whether it's seeing birds arrive in the spring, or it's these kind of signals that things are healthy, we're moving in the right direction. But I think what I like about those kind of things is that it's not about measuring every single element and comparing it against some abstract standard. It's actually looking, what are these signals for health in this place, in this community, that will tell us that we're doing something meaningful.
And I think that is so much more powerful and less of a magnet than this idea of having to talk about the events or name the ripples or the number of people that have come, because that just pulls us towards this magnet of these are the things that are important.
One of my teachers talks about these things of seeing outcomes, effects, and impacts. So this idea of impact being those signs of health within the system, and that you're working to create effects that contribute to that.
Yeah, I've been really focused on small acts of humanity. Like, what are the smallest things that can happen between people that make them feel connected or visible, and how long-lasting is this very small act? I keep on fantasizing about this market that you're talking about, and Jim leaning over the fence and saying, have you seen what's going on up there? I reckon you might enjoy it. That person going, oh, okay, going up there and being part of the market. But that moment that Jim talks to the neighbour being the small act of big participation.
Yeah.
We don't actually know if that happened or not.
See, this is the tricky thing, right? What are the things that we can kind of track that indicate that this is happening?
Well, gosh, if this is about getting traction, how do we get traction? I reckon we're in the middle of it. We really are. Next episode, I'm really interested in looking at some of the turmoil that comes from the magnets and the counter work that we do as we're trying to do something different, but in a place where we have all these defaults pulling us back. And so I think we should call episode 2 In the Turmoil.
In the turmoil.
Nice.
Join us next week for, episode 2, season 2. Ka kite.
Ka kite.
Thanks goes to 104.6 Planet FM Community Access Radio Auckland for their excellent recording studio and guidance in producing this podcast. The music is Pistoriosis by Shane Ivers of soundmanmusic.com, Mal Johannesson for bringing together draft episodes, Mish Maskol for their audio engineering expertise, and our weavers Libby, Jalen, Charles, Tui, Nay, Holly, Lisa, Ray and Carol.
With additional music by Snake and Bongo and Afrobot. Final sound production and mix by Barney Duncan.